the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. This is episode 421, the second show of our week. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL Wire site covering the Arizona Cardinals, and with me is Seth Cox, RevengeOfTheBirds.com, site editor there, the SB Nation Arizona Cardinals site, and one of the hosts of the NFL Draft, the original Draft Breakdown podcast. Seth, it's show number 2 of the week. We went into, extra long episode last time. We closed in on, I think it was an hour 40, breaking down everything from the draft, and now we get to pull back a little bit, and we're starting to get to the nicer stuff of the offseason, lighter things. There's going to be we're going to have a schedule release a week from tonight. Maybe I will have to see. Maybe we'll have an immediate reaction show because we should know the schedule that night, and so we can kind of break things down from there. But yeah, what's been your favorite quiet storyline since the draft?
Yeah, I think a lot of it for me has been that we saw Monty kind of hold his cards. And what I mean by that is, whether this is 100% accurate or not, we'll never ever know. But the word on the street was that the Cardinals were going to ask for a second-round pick and a player for DeAndre Hopkins, and nobody wanted that, or wanted to pay that. And what did Monty do? He held on to him.
Let's start with that then. So let's start. That's one of the topics we want to talk about in the show, is to discuss the DeAndre Hopkins non-trade. Let's start with that. I will say this. Didn't it feel, the feeling we all had during the offseason is that trading Hopkins was a priority, wasn't it? And it wasn't necessarily because they want to get rid of Hopkins, but rather it was about clearing. It wasn't even about clearing the cap space this year. It's so that it was clearing all the cap space of his contract next year. For me, it felt like that was kind of an off-season priority to me. Like they wanted to do this to create greater flexibility for 2024.
Yeah, but one of the things that we've seen, and we saw it in the NFL draft, was that unless it benefits the Arizona Cardinals, they're not going to do business just to do business. And I don't know if it's going to work. Obviously, we've got, a little over 2 months until training camp starts. We've got four months and a week until the NFL season kicks off. But it is a ballsy, brash approach by Monty to say, this is what we will take for what is still a, top 10, 12 receiver in the NFL. If you can't meet the asking price, don't call. And it felt like a priority. It felt like it was going to happen. And then you have, the people that want to be, I don't want to say insiders, but they want to try to project the future, right? So they're like, oh, he's going to have to go for like a 5th rounder. And I'm like, the Cardinals aren't going to do that.
Or the idea that they're going to have to pay some of the salary. I'm like, that made no sense at all. I'm like, at least if they're going to trade him, they will want the cap relief. And as it is, they'd only get $8 million roughly of cap relief. So if every million that they add, that they kick in, is just making it less attractive to do it. Now, and to be fair, at no point did DeAndre say he wanted out. Although through our back channels of people who, now these aren't like reportable things, but behind the scenes, Hopkins did want out, and it wasn't, and more than anything, it's because it was a lot of the uncertainty moving forward. He wanted to win. He's at that point of his career. He wants to win and rebuild his legacy, and while doing so, do so on a winning team. So he wanted to leave, but he never made, like, it was never like, you trade me. It wasn't a trade request like Budda did. It wasn't anything. It was just quietly. So, he wants to win. He doesn't want to really be part of a rebuild of any sort. And so, but even when the draft happened, the talk of reports. So it was reported by more than one person, or maybe it was one person multiple times that they were asking. Basically, yeah, you said it. They wanted a premium day 2 pick, basically second rounder plus something, which is basically what the Cardinals paid for him back in 2020. When we broke down that trade that also included David Johnson, the way I liked to look at that deal is that it was 2 separate deals that they combined, because it was the Cardinals gave up David Johnson, a second-round pick in 2020, and then a fourth-round pick in 2021 for Hopkins and a 2020 fourth-round pick. And I liked to look at it as, okay, they traded David Johnson for a fourth-round pick, and they traded a second this year and a fourth next year for DeAndre, which is essentially what they wanted. They wanted a second-rounder plus something, so either a player of value or another draft pick of some sort of worth. And the reports that came out is, one, that the money was a sticking point for other teams. They wanted the salary down. They wanted the Cardinals to kick in money, or they're going to have to lower their salary. And we all, even within our circle of friends and writers and analysts in our group chat, we seem to think that they would end up, they'd end up with settling for like a third-round pick, and that's it. And we all sort of felt that way. Apparently, that was never actually the plan. It was, from what it looks like now, my perspective from this is that, all right, Hopkins is something that is a valuable asset. We can keep him. Or if we do trade him, he's worth this much. We will move on from him if we get this much. And from everyone nationally and locally, it was, oh, they got to dump Hopkins. Cardinals have cap space. They didn't need the cap base from Hopkins' deal. It was, hey, let's clear this money for next year so that we have greater flexibility to do what Monty wants with the roster and not be tied down by, Keim stuff. But actually, what it was, instead of we need to get rid of him, it's like, all right, we will get rid of him. We'll trade if this. If not, no, we'll keep him. And doesn't this feel like now, because all of the projections, a lot of the projections for this year, not only were they factoring in the fact that Kyler Murray is going to start the season hurt, this and that, but it was also banking on the fact that DeAndre Hopkins was going to be traded. Doesn't keeping him change, like, ever so slightly the expected outcome for the 2023 season now?
Yeah, and, it's one of those situations where you feel like that Kyler has let them know, like, guys, I'll be ready. Like, I'll be back. You and I talked about the other day. You have, if he's not available or ready by October, then it's a problem, right?
Yeah.
But if he is available, then it's going to be one of those situations where you're probably going to get, 13 or 14 games out of him, and that could be a huge,
it's, again, I never understood some of the things that were come out, because there was the report that he might miss as much as half the season, that he's going to take it easy. That wasn't from Kyler's camp. You found out like that wasn't Kyler's camp. Kyle Odegaard's like that wasn't Kyler's camp saying that he was gonna wait till he was 100%. No, he's gonna work his ass off to get back to be back 100% as fast as possible, and wasn't gonna. This was the organization kind of slow burning it, and it made him sound like, oh, he's got his money. It once again, it cast a terrible light on Kyler, when all he's been doing has been grinding the crap out of his rehab, trying to get. Now he's not going to be stupid about it, but he's pushing to come back and play. He's not trying to wait till midseason. I think if it were up to him and his body, if his body were to respond the way he wants it to, he'd be ready for the start of the season.
Right, and I think that's what his goal is still too. So we'll see how it works out, but it just becomes fun to look at the people, because it's becoming obvious that a lot of these reports and these things were coming out of the old management team, and
right.
These were the guys putting the bad Kyler vibes out there, and unfortunately a lot of fans ate them up as like, the God's honest truth and the only thing that you can think about him. And I don't know how it works out in the end, but I'm hopeful now that he's being a little more active on social media, which again, the fact that he wasn't being a problem is such a silly thing, but we do live in that age, right? And that he's here more is going to be a positive moving forward for him and the organization, and that we'll see this kind of work out as something. But at the end of the day, this is a better team with DeAndre Hopkins on it.
Right.
And
that
again,
receiving core, actually, like before, when you take Hopkins off and you're going Hollywood, Rondell Moore, Zach Pascal, Greg Dortch, you're like, eh. But now you've got like that. This is the problem: is that last year it was the same trio, and we literally did not have a single game with all three of those players. But now you've got a very healthy in terms of talent, talent-rich room of Hopkins, Hollywood, Dortch, Moore. Then you add in Zach Pascal. Then you add in Michael Wilson. It's a room where you're okay, and it makes it.
It's also a much more and you said it,
varied,
it's never healthy, but it's a much more diverse talent room than what we saw last year, and that's again, a lot of it was just injury and just it didn't work out, but having everybody in that room, if everybody comes out healthy and ready to go, like this is a group and a room that can be one of the best in the NFL. And the Cardinals putting emphasis on addressing and hopefully upgrading the offensive line, and we say hopefully because let's be honest, we don't know what's going to happen. We're hopeful. We're incredibly hopeful that Paris Johnson Jr. is a really good player.
But even good players off, like let's look back at the Raiders' Colton Miller. That first year, he was absolutely atrocious.
Right, and so you just have to look at it and say, okay, what is this? What is this team? What do they have? And I think you'll be excited, impressed if you see this team come out healthy and ready to go.
Coming up next on the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, special of Cardinals Talk on the Web. Let's move on to talk about another kind of bit of storyline coming on. That's Isaiah Simmons and his 5th-year option. That's coming next on Rise Up Sea Red. We're back on the Rise of Sea Red podcast, special Cardinals Talk on the Web. The Cardinals chose to decline, or rather to not exercise Isaiah Simmons' 5th-year option. From his being a first-round pick, there's the option to pick up a 5th year which can be worth X amount of dollars depending on certain achievements. He met the playing time but didn't have the accolades, and so it would have paid him next year $12.7 million. And if we look at the performance, it's on the surface, it's a mild surprise because statistically, especially the last two seasons, Simmons' production looks good.
Yeah,
we know
improved.
that it's not 100%. Like, there are still things he needs to do, but if you look at the balance of tackles and sacks and pressures and passes defensed, tackles for loss, interceptions, he fills the stat sheet. And doing so from such a number of positions, you'd think that you would exercise that. But the new coaching staff views that linebacker position a little bit differently.
Yeah, they view it properly, and I don't mean to, this isn't a let's back on Steve Keim episode, so we'll stay out of that. But like, we've talked about it for years. You just tweeted about it again, something that I've said on the show a number of times. The amount of investment they had made in the off-ball linebacker position.
Let's review that for a second. So since 2013, they used 3 first-round picks, a second-round pick, and then a $36 million free agent contract for the inside linebacker position. It started with Dale Buchanan. Now, granted, when he was drafted, he was a safety, and I don't think they intended on playing him at linebacker. It just played out that way. But that's it. So you had Dale Buchanan. You had Hassan Reddick. You had, 4 first-round picks. I'm sorry, I can't remember if I got that right on the tweet or not, but it's 4 first-round picks, a second-round pick. So you had, in 2013, Kevin Minter in the second round. You had Dayon Buchanan in 2014 in the first round. You had 2017, first round, Hassan Reddick. You had 2020, first round, Isaiah Simmons. 2021, first round, Zaven Collins. And then you add on top of that 2019, the 4-year, $36 million contract that they gave Jordan Hicks. That's throwing a lot. And isn't it really all about chasing Darrell Washington and Carlos Dansby, right? It was chasing Dansby and Washington.
Yeah, I was just chasing the ghost of those guys, and it's unfortunate that he invested so much time, energy, and capital. And this is going to come off a way I don't mean it to, but in a position that's not that important. Like, it's a key position to good defenses, but you look at the all-pro linebackers the last couple seasons, and outside of Roquan Smith, who was a linebacker in college, was a true inside backer in college, you don't have guys that are first-round picks. Like, it's just not a position that you invest that way in, and yet every offseason it seemed like they were once again chasing that ghost to try and find their guy and find the guy and find and so people love the picks, but I mean, look at the middle linebackers. Fred Warner, obviously very talented player, drafted in the 3rd round out of BYU, right? You look at like I said, Roquan Smith, and then you go to the other guys. Alex Highsmith, right? He was a 3rd round pick out of Charlotte. Matt Milano was a 5th round pick out of Boston College. Like, the position isn't a premium position. You don't have
Bobby Wagner, 2nd round pick,
right.
2012.
TJ Edwards, I think he was undrafted, right?
I think he was a 4th or a 5th.
Undrafted.
for some reason. I remember
Undrafted out of
seeing something.
I'm looking at it right now.
Yep, undrafted.
Like the things you can do at linebacker is incredible.
Devondre Campbell, 4th round pick.
Right, like Demario Davis, 3rd round pick. Like it's just not a position that you invest premium picks in, because there are a plethora of them. There are guys all over the place that can do the job. When we talk about like left tackle, and people will be like, well, sometimes left tackles, get drafted late. Yeah, they do. You're exactly right. But most of them get drafted in the 1st round. I mean, look at the all pros, and we talked about this with Paris Johnson, right? Lane Johnson, 1st round pick. Trent Williams, 1st round pick. Laramie Tunsil, 1st round pick. The guy that is the outlier in that group is Teron Armstead, who was a 3rd round pick, but he was coming from Arkansas Pine Bluff. So like those tackle positions, those are 1st round picks. The rushers, same type of thing. Guys getting after the quarterback. You've got Brian Burns, Quinnen Williams. I think Dexter Lawrence was a 1st round pick, was he not? Yeah, 1st round pick.
He was.
Dexter Lawrence, Aaron Donald,
Nick Bosa.
Yeah, Micah Parsons. Those
Miles
guys.
Garrett, guys that top 2, 3, 4, 5 picks in the draft, and you do get outliers. Like Chandler Jones was a mid to late 1st round pick, but like especially the dynamic edge guys, it's not very often that the ones that have long productive careers are usually first.
Right, the multi-time Pro
like
Bowlers,
you can have like the one or 2 year wonders and you get out of that, but that are later on. But guys that are elite pass rushers, you get them. You go get them.
Right, and so you look at the linebacker position. It just, the investments never made sense. And then you look at what they're paid, right? And so that's the biggest thing. And because he was a top 10 pick, and I don't know all the language. If you know it, go ahead. But because he was a top 10 pick, he gets X amount of the highest salaries based on that. And so when you look at it from that position or that whole situation, and it's tough because as a linebacker, it's based on obviously outside. It's based on outside and inside, so it's not just based on one guy, and that's what the problem becomes. And so you look at it,
right, because some linebackers are edge guys, depending on the scheme.
Right, and so you look at it. So like the top guys, Roquan Smith, obviously, the top guy. Shaq Leonard, who was early second round pick, obviously he's had some health issues lately. He's formerly known as Darius Leonard. If you guys haven't followed along with his career, he changed his name. Fred Warner, we just talked about. Tremaine Edmonds, CJ Mosley, Deion Jones is like one of the outliers there, right? You mentioned it. Devondre Campbell, Demario Davis, Devin White. Those are. Oh, sorry. Actually, I went past what he would. Yeah, so he would be the 7th highest paid inside linebacker in the NFL. I'm sorry. Like, even if he plays well next year, he's not going to be worth that. Like,
right.
He's got to play literally at an all-pro level to be worth that. And the position and people, I see people say all the time, well, you paid Kyler and Kyler's never been an all-pro. Yeah, those are 2 different positions. Finding a quarterback and finding an off-ball linebacker are 2 completely different things. So you also have to remember that only 1 quarterback makes the all-pro team, or 2 if you consider second team all-pro. 3 linebackers make the all-pro team every year. So like, you've got to find a way to understand what is going on. And so, I just never agreed with paying him. It just didn't make sense. And so you just kind of look at it, these guys are well paid. It's insane to me to think that he's worth more than a Matt Milano or
Right. And ultimately, he has. I guess when they drafted it, they viewed him potentially being that sort of like elite linebacker, do it all type guy, and he's been able to do it all, just not at the elite level because he does. There are some linebacker things he struggles at. He's not great in run fits. He is great. He's good in coverage. He can move side to side. He is a playmaker. Absolutely.
He's a wonderful run and chase linebacker, and that's what his strengths are.
Like, he is a great playmaker. But there's like in 2021, he made plays, but also gave up a lot of plays last year, and playing mostly as a slot corner. Let's be honest. He, like, outside of week 1, where there was a lot going on wrong, and including him, he was unprepared for whatever, playing wrong leverage. After week 1, we didn't see Isaiah Simmons being a problem in coverage.
Yeah, we didn't see the blown assignments as much. And that's so you and I talked about this draft day. We talked about it before his first season. We talked about it after his first season where he's barely on the field. And you know, one of the disservices that Clemson did to him was what made him so valuable in the draft to teams. And it was that Swiss Army knife ability. But what people struggle with or don't understand about that is the NFL game is a lot harder, like a lot harder. So mastering a position is nearly impossible. Mastering multiple positions is basically impossible. Like, there are very few guys, Budda Baker, Tyrann Mathieu, and again, we're getting back into multi-time All-Pros, Troy Polamalu, got Ed Reed, Bob Sanders, like those guys could play all over the field. Isaiah Simmons is a very athletic player. He's a very good player. He is not even in the same stratosphere as those guys. And that's the problem, is you took a guy and then you said, well, we want you to learn how to play linebacker. Well, it's going to be a tough adjustment because he had never played linebacker. I mean, he had lined up at linebacker, but he wasn't an inside linebacker. It was
like,
that
he
short.
He didn't have to. There were, most of the time, like, run fits were not a thing he had to worry about.
Right. It was that short white guy that I can't remember his name. That was the linebacker for Clemson.
Yes, I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, the like roughneck. I can't even remember his name, but I know I can picture him. And so that's the thing, is like, so he got to Arizona. He was a disappointment in year 1 because, quite frankly, he was going to be. I mean, why would he be better than that when he had never played as a true off-ball linebacker down to down? And then so you go from that to, then he was like, oh, we are going to use him to his strengths. We're going to play him all over the place.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, James Skalski. Yeah, we're both looking it up.
But yeah, I could picture him. I was like, what was his name?
Yeah, and so then you get, so then you get him here. So the first year is rough, and it was rough. I mean, there's nothing wrong with admitting it was not a pretty first year, but it was like, okay, it's year 1. He's never really played the position. Let's see. And then that's when they started doing him a disservice. Instead of just being like, hey, you're a linebacker, like, learn how to play linebacker, and then we will start to adjust and move you around. It became, all right, you've played linebacker for a year, you weren't good at it. That's okay. What we're going to do now is move you around. And it's like, whoa. Like, why not just make sure that he can play linebacker first and then start to sprinkle in the moving around? Like, when you don't know how to do one thing, what is it?
Jack of all trades, master of nothing.
Yeah, master of none. That's Isaiah Simmons to a T. Like, he can do anything, but like, you're never like, oh my gosh, this guy, I want him to be this player. And so it's fine. And you have a serviceable player, you have a guy that deserves snaps, but you don't have a guy that you're just like, hey, put him on the field and leave him there. And that's where the issue comes into play, right? Like he just needs to become a guy that can do something extremely well and continue to grow off of that, as opposed to being a guy that does a little bit of everything and it's good, but it's not to the level worthy of the contract he, by the way, not that he's asking for, but what would be required of the Cardinals to pay him.
Yeah. Ultimately, it feels like, and it sounds like Gannon and Nick Rawlis now kind of have a plan for him. Doesn't it feel like, because we felt like going into the offseason that before the free agency happened that he would, if we were looking at Philadelphia's defense, he would fit perfectly as ideally even a better version of Kaiser White, right?
Yeah.
And then when they signed, we thought, okay, they'll probably sign T.J. Edwards or something. But then they signed Kaiser White, but it doesn't. I haven't seen it yet, but I think White is going to be their middle linebacker. Is going to be their middle guy, and that I think the role that they will have Simmons is like Kaiser had in Philly. I think that's my guess right now.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting just to see how it kind of plays out, because, if they're going to make it, and that's the other thing people have to understand. And again, this is not a shot at Simmons or not a shot at Keim either, but the reality is that these guys have no connection or they're not
Simmons was not their guy.
Yeah, to Simmons. And so in the end, it just becomes this situation where you go, oh, is this, we'll see how it works out, right? And so we'll see, man. I hope for his sake, the Cardinals' sake, that it works out. I hope that they do a good job with him and he's able to become a guy that can be trusted and counted on defensively.
Coming on next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web. It's a big topic, but nothing really happened. It's Budda Baker. He also was not traded. That's coming on next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web. It was no surprise, but Budda did request a trade because he wanted a new contract, and they wouldn't give him a new contract. But it didn't happen, so he didn't trade it. I wasn't surprised at all. I never expected him to get traded because I felt that this trade request was just like the Chandler Jones and Patrick Peterson trade requests. That it was trying to create leverage that he really didn't have. And so we won't see him on the field for any voluntary work this offseason.
And quite frankly, if he doesn't have guaranteed money, I'm not going to complain about it.
Right.
I mean, you would like him to be there for the new regime and whatnot.
And I believe he is, from what I understand, and Gannon downplayed it. They said there were guys in the building who weren't on the field. Maybe Budda's in the building, but maybe not. We know he's working. Like, he might just be there for classroom work, and he's like, I'm not going to do any of the physical stuff.
But Isaiah was there too, and not
correct.
Working,
and that makes sense too, because there was some uncertainty about his option, and so he didn't want. I would guess that makes sense as well.
Again, something we talk about all the time. We're pro player in a lot of ways, and this is one of them. Like, if you are if you're in a contract dispute, as much as we'd love to see you on the field with the team, it's one of those situations that it does unfortunately make sense, and it is for the best of the player to make sure that they take care of themselves and take care of their financial aspects of things, or if they do get hurt, it's in the season where they're kind of guaranteed that money after X amount of games and things like that.
Yeah.
So it sucks as a fan, it sucks as guys that cover the team, but as just unbiased observers, it does make sense to us.
Yeah, totally. It makes sense. As we look at the two situations, Do you see, even next offseason, a trade for Hopkins or Budda?
I could still see them moving Hopkins this year before the trade deadline if either A, Kyler's not back, or B, that they're really not gelling or something like that. I would be surprised if they moved on from Budda, unless it just becomes such a toxic environment that they can't work with him.
Right. Because if they got to next offseason, they probably would redo his deal.
Yeah,
I would be still playing at a high level.
I wouldn't be shocked if they did something mid-season. Like they're like, "Hey, okay, let's do it now."
One thing I know that he wanted, so I do know that he asked for an extension, didn't get it, but he also would have been okay. He would have been content at minimum had he just been given guarantees this year.
Yeah, and I mean, again, and this is the crappy part of the business that Jess and I are very aware of, but also whatever. But it's one of those situations where he needs to feel the guarantee because he's at the end of it. And here's the other thing, and this is the dirty little secret that nobody talks about. This is just par for the course for his agent, David Mulugeta. This is what he does.
Oh, that I guess that makes sense, because a lot of the things that I heard he was saying are agent talk, because his agent got in his ear and said, "Hey, what if you get hurt? They could do you dirty." I'm like, that would never happen. So there's a couple of things. Budda really doesn't have anything to worry about. I will say this about how NFL contracts work. Even though he doesn't have any guaranteed money, the fear of getting hurt during off-season work, he really doesn't have any fear of being cut, because one, you cannot an NFL team cannot just cut an injured player unless they are waived injured.
Right, and then in which case
if they clear waivers, they revert to injured reserve, and there can be an injury settlement, but there's no guarantee of an injury settlement. So Budda, if he got injured enough in the offseason, now it's a different story if he's getting injured off-site on his own workouts. Then they're not protected. Then they're not protected. So that's why it's beneficial for them to show up for the voluntary things, is that if they get hurt, the team can't cut them. The team cannot cut an injured player even in the offseason. Now, what some play, if it's a minor injury, what you'll see sometimes is them on lesser players is okay, let's hold him out. We'll wait till he's healthy. Okay, you're healthy. Okay, you're cut.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. They wouldn't do that to Budda. Budda's in a situation that wouldn't happen to him. And so some of the things that he's being told, his agents telling him, would never apply to him. They wouldn't ever apply to him, because the team would not do him that dirty because of who he is and how important he is to that defense. So if he were hurt in the offseason, they wouldn't nurse him to health only to cut him while healthy, because he's too important. And if you get hurt, and that's the thing about the offseason that's important for these players to understand, is that you actually in some ways are more at risk at doing workouts on your own unless you're super careful, because if you get injured off-site, the team does not have to honor that contract that they put you on NFI. It's a non-football injury because you weren't doing that, and on an NFI, they are not obligated to pay you.
No, not at all. And so that's what you have to look at. And it's one of those things with this whole situation that I'm not surprised. I expected, this to go down this way. Allegedly, the reports on the interwebs were that they asked for 3 first-round picks to even get the discussion started. so
they at least, all right, we'll do, but this, which makes sense. And the truth is, if you look at the comps, and they're hard, it's hard to comp because players like that don't normally get traded.
No.
But you have you have Jamal Adams going for pair of first. You have Minka Fitzpatrick going for first and things like that. Now, granted, they were still on their first deal, but I don't think it changed. I think if you get anything less than a first, it's not worth trading. It's not worth trading him, and so you're under contract, so play. And then we'll deal with this. We'll deal with things in a year. So, yeah.
Right.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. And the fact that they were able to – and again, the Cardinals were able to do what they did in the draft. Go in with 8 picks, come out with 9 players and 4 future picks, and to do it without having to deal Hopkins or Budda, guess what?
Or give up any future picks.
Yeah, well, that too. It's incredible. It's incredible. Well, we wrapped up this edition of the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. Unless there is something pressing due to end of the school year schedules, we might not have a Tuesday show, but it sounds like what we can probably do, unless we want to get together and try and predict the schedule, play around, try and get a quick show in, and then we can react to the show. So that will kind of go that maybe a Tuesday show, but definitely a Thursday show for next week. And with that, that's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. This is the Rise Up C-Red podcast. Thanks for listening as always.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up C-Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, C-Red, and of course, Rise Up, C-Red.